thank you for joining us in this specialized Peoria class. We're really excited to be able to offer this class, one of the first ones in the new year. And we're especially excited to always partner with Mulcahy, Beth, and the City of Peoria and her team. We've had a long-standing relationship and often provide education classes to our residents. And we are excited to have once again Beth and her team join us for today's session. So thank you, Beth.
Awesome. Well, thanks for the warm welcome. Hi, everybody. My name is Beth Mulcahy, and I'm with the Mulcahy Law Firm. And I just want to start out by saying thank you so much to the City of Peoria for partnering with our firm today to provide free education to board members, owners, and managers via the Peoria HOA Academy. Usually this time of the year, or maybe a month or so, we're meeting together in Peoria on a Saturday, and we have an entire day together where we're able to talk about hot topics, questions that your associations have. And unfortunately, due to the pandemic, we have had to pivot and we can't meet in person right now. But we do have a lot of exciting online programming for you over the next 6 months. And I'm happy to say that I'm starting off the year with my first class on HOAs and condo law for the City of Peoria. So Jamie's on it. She was the first person to ask me to do a class this time around. So she's my first class of this year. I would like to just start out by thanking the City of Peoria for having our firm partner with them. We've been partnering together for over a decade, and it's been truly a pleasure on my part being able to have them sponsor these classes, and then having my firm and other law firms that practice in this area come to you to provide free education. Because ultimately our goal here today is to answer your questions and to talk about hot topics that you as board members, homeowners, and managers may have regarding running your associations. Because ultimately the goal is just to have successful associations. Our goal is for things to function efficiently and for associations to follow the law and for problems that come up to be addressed quickly and expeditiously, so that you don't have a lot of hassles when you're serving on your board, and so that homeowners have an overall general satisfaction about living in an HOA or a condo in Peoria. So let's start out with the roadmap for today. We're going to be discussing hot topics facing HOAs and condos in 2021. I think we all can agree that 2020 was a challenging year, but I will say this. So many associations and management companies and the City of Peoria, along with a number of other cities in the state of Arizona, really rallied and were able to pivot well to continue providing services and to, make sure that our communities are successful. So I'd like to just shout out by saying, first, have a shout out for them saying, great job. I know it's been a challenging year. It's been a challenging year for our firm too, because we've had to adjust to so many different things that have been happening. So what are the hot topics we're going to talk about today? We're going to talk a little bit about assessment collections and whether or not this is going to be an issue that is definitely going to be facing associations in 2021. Will there be an uptick in the number of owners who don't pay assessments? And how will that affect our budget for our association? And virtual meetings, of course, we've all now hopefully transitioned to virtual meetings for our regular board meetings and for our committee meetings and for our annual meeting. So I'm going to give you some tips on how to be successful in running your virtual meetings. Keeping your common areas safe. Really, when we started 2020, that had a different meaning than it does now. So making sure that we are providing a safe environment for our residents so that we can limit the spread of COVID within your communities. We're going to be talking about some suggestions and some things that associations are doing in Arizona and around the country to make sure that you're keeping your residents safe and your common areas, clean and disinfected. We're also going to be talking about owner disputes with everybody who's home with either virtual learning or with being remote for your businesses or whatever your job is. We're seeing a lot more disagreements between owners and between boards and owners, and frankly, between board members. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about what's the best way to handle that so we can neutralize things and make sure that everybody's getting along better in 2021. We're going to talk a little bit about Prop 207, the new law pertaining to marijuana, and how that may affect associations as well today. And finally, we're going to talk a little bit about what to expect with our legislature this year. What bills do we anticipate will be moving forward this year in the legislature? So we have a lot of hot topics. We're going to kind of move through them quickly. How we're going to handle questions today is that, it really helps me when I, get feedback from you as I'm teaching this class. So please be sure to put notes in the comments section. If you look at the bottom of your screen, there should be a question box. And you're welcome to put questions in throughout the presentation. I'm going to save about 15 minutes at the end of the presentation to talk about any questions that you may have. And so please continue throughout the presentation because we have a number of people on this call today, I believe over 40. It's hard to take questions, while I'm doing the presentation, especially when I only have an hour for the presentation. So what we'll do is we'll save about 10 to 15 minutes at the end of the presentation, and then I'll go through all the questions. And I promise I won't sign off until I answer every question. So just as an introductory role, I would like to tell you a little bit about myself in case I haven't met any of you before. My name is Beth Mulcahy, and I've been practicing in the area of representing community associations, HOAs, and condominiums as their legal counsel or attorney for the past 24 years. And I'm the managing partner and senior partner of the Mulcahy Law Firm. And I have really enjoyed, representing associations for the past 24 years. Truly, it has been a pleasure of mine. I've served on my board where I live on and off for over 14 years too. So I feel like I bring kind of a unique experience to this class today in that I've been a lawyer for associations for, over 2 decades. I've served hard time on my board as the president of my association, the vice president of my association, the treasurer of my association, director at large. And I also have had a little stint as a disgruntled owner where I wasn't real happy with how things were going when I wasn't on the board anymore. So I hope that I can bring unique perspective to you today and answer all of your questions. Well, first, it would be great if we could just start out with, I'd like to have a little feedback throughout the class. So we're going to do these things called polls. And how it works is I'm asking you a question, which you'll see on your screen right now. And it says, what best describes your role in your association? And then I just need you to vote as to whether you're a board member, you're an interested homeowner, or you're a community manager. And then after you vote, then I can better understand who's in my audience today so that I can, maybe have a little different perspectives as I'm teaching. So the poll's in progress, as you can see, probably at the top of your screen, it's saying that on mine. I wonder if it's saying it on yours too. And then the poll results will be coming out here in a minute. Okay, so who's on this call today? So we have 75% of you are board members. We have 13% of you are homeowners and 4% of you are community managers. So we really have a lot of board members here today, a few homeowners who are not board members, and then 1 manager. So welcome everybody to our class today. Okay, first let's start out with a quick update on what's going on in Arizona. Starting in March, our firm was really dialed into what's going on with our state in terms of the restrictions that the governor was placing through executive orders and different things that were coming out each day on requirements and things that we could and couldn't do. So yesterday was a big day in Arizona. The legislature opened, the Arizona legislature opened, and we're going to talk about, what's going to happen this year in the legislature in a minute. But generally, the governor had a state of the state discussion yesterday. And it was the shortest one he's ever had, which is kind of interesting. And, he really started talking a lot about, what the plans are in response to COVID-19. And also he came up with some, possible legislative agenda things that he wanted to accomplish this year. So let's start out with what's the bad news and the good news. I like to hear the bad news first because I like to end with the good news. The bad news is that according to several reports published yesterday, Arizona ranks #1 for its rate of new COVID-19 cases, and hospitals are experiencing a surge within a surge. So no question, it's a scary time in our country, especially scary time in Arizona, with the increase in the number of COVID-19 cases. We do have some good news, though, and the good news is that we had over 150,000 vaccine doses have already been administered in Arizona as of yesterday. We hope that those numbers will continue to climb. Yesterday, in Governor Ducey's State of the State, he stressed the importance of getting available vaccines to residents as quickly as possible, and stating that mass vaccinations will bring Arizona out of the pandemic. He announced that State Farm Stadium, home of the Arizona Cardinals, would be a 24/7 vaccination site, which is awesome. I know that Peoria is very close to State Farm Stadium, so that's close proximity to many of the residents of Peoria. In addition to talking about the vaccine, Governor Ducey also highlighted the economy, education, and mental health in yesterday's address. The governor reiterated his opposition to having lockdowns and made it clear that in Arizona, we shouldn't expect to see any in the future. It's really clear that the pandemic is going to be, a major force in 2021 and is going to shape not only the legislative session, but what happens in, our business, our education, and many different other facets of what's going on in Arizona. So it was interesting to hear what the governor had to say, and that hopefully the vaccination rollout is going to be, moving quickly in the very near future. Okay, so let's switch gears and we're going to talk about how the pandemic is continuing to affect our HOAs and condos as we go throughout the presentation. But I just want to start out with, what the governor has said yesterday. Okay, let's talk about a hot topic first, Prop 207, which was the marijuana legalization initiative. How is this going to impact associations? I've been thinking about this ever since the general election in November, where this was passed by 60%, a little bit over 60% voted yes in favor of marijuana legalization. Basically, what the bottom line on Prop 207 is that it legalizes and governs the adult use, regulation, and taxation of recreational marijuana. And after the general election, where it was approved by 60% of Arizona's population that voted, then the Arizona Secretary of State certified the approval, and the proposition became the Smart and Safe Arizona Act. Counties, cities, town ordinances are being enacted right now in many different cities and towns, counties, to enact further restrictions and regulations on recreational marijuana. In fact, Peoria has already enacted an ordinance on this, talking about it's prohibited to be smoking marijuana in any public area. So I think we're going to continue to see this being a hot topic for associations. And I have already received a couple questions from owners and from boards as to, what to do when we have a difficult situation with somebody smoking marijuana in common areas, or potentially the marijuana smoke in a unit or a lot causing a nuisance to another owner. So let's just break this down really quick. The primary concern probably that I'm hearing from most associations is, what if we have owners who are smoking marijuana on common areas? And so let's go back to what the Arizona Legislative Council said. The act does not authorize a person to smoke marijuana in a public place or an open space. And a person who owns, manages, or leases a property can prohibit or regulate possessing, smoking, producing, processing, manufacturing, or selling marijuana on the property. And so this is just really important for associations to keep in mind. If you start to see problems that are associated to this new act on legalization of marijuana, the association definitely has the right to enact reasonable rules and regulations prohibiting and or regulating the use of marijuana on common areas. What I would recommend is, I don't like to overcorrect right at the beginning. Let's see how this plays out. If your association starts to see issues with this, like maybe somebody comes to the pool and is smoking marijuana, or maybe, they're walking their dog and they're sitting on a bench smoking it, then your association may need to seriously consider passing a rule, prohibiting that. But I think probably what I would recommend to our clients and to our friends that are listening in on the call today would be, let's see how this plays out. Let's see if this becomes a problem in your association. And if it does, we should definitely start thinking about passing rules and then notifying the owners of the rules. Now, some associations want to be more proactive. They want to have that rule in place now. And if you do, that's fine. The key thing that you need to think about is make sure that you have your legal counsel involved in helping you draft it. And if I was your legal counsel, the things that I would be looking at are, I look at your association documents. Typically it's in your bylaws, to see how much authority we have for passing rules. Hopefully it's broad rulemaking authority, and you can, enact rules easily that say that there can be no marijuana smoking on common areas. Let's talk just briefly about a tricky area, which would be, what about smoking marijuana within a lot or unit? So let's say somebody, fires up their barbecue every night and they're also smoking marijuana, and the smoke is going over to another person's yard and they don't like it. Or if you're in a condo and, the ventilation system, doesn't prohibit the marijuana smoke from traveling from one unit to another unit. In fact, I actually had a lady that contacted me in the fourth quarter of 2020 who was complaining about this. And, it's a really kind of a difficult situation because people, are entitled to do what they want within the four, walls of their property, right? But they're not entitled to create a nuisance for other owners. And so definitely seek out legal counsel, talk to your attorney, call my office if you have any questions. If you have a situation where we have one neighbor complaining that another neighbor's marijuana use is impacting their ability to use and enjoy their property, because there are solutions on that. And some associations, or even some condominium associations, we've noticed, are starting to implement no smoking rules within the units too. So not only in the common areas, but within the unit. So reach out to us if you have any problems on that as this law kind of unfolds and as we start to see issues come up. Okay, next hot topic we're going to talk about is what to expect this year in the 2021 legislature. I think we all can agree that last year's legislature was a very unique year in that, the legislature shut down significantly earlier than it normally would. There were no HOA or condo bills last year. Basically the only thing that the legislature, of substance, the legislature accomplished was passing the budget. Which was outstanding because there were so many challenges. This year's legislature is going to be different, because of the pandemic. We're not going to have a lot of in-person, discussion down at the legislature. If anybody wants to testify, it's going to all be done virtually. And so what do we expect this year? So I think what we should do is look at what was introduced last year that didn't pass. Again, no bills passed pertaining to associations and condos, and anticipate that we're going to see the same bills again. And in fact, the legislature just opened yesterday, but we're kind of legislature wonks at our firm, and we've been following it already for a week. Sometimes there are bills introduced even before the legislature opens. And there were already 2 bills introduced as of last Friday. And just kind of a reminder is that while the legislature is in session, every week our firm puts out a free informational publication on what's going on at the legislature, what bills are pending, what status they're at. And so I think here's what we can expect this year for the legislature. I think we can see more green bills. Last year we saw a bill on evaporative coolers, associations not being able to prohibit them, solar panels, additional restrictions on associations not being able to restrict solar panels. Peaceful assembly, which, wow, that was kind of interesting that there was a bill on that in last year's legislature, especially with what's going on right now in our country. That was one of the bills actually that was introduced on Friday. And so associations not being able to prohibit peaceful assembly within their communities. And also association members being able to, put up signs for measures that pertain to the association, such as removal of directors or election of directors, or any other issues that may pertain to associations. Wow, that's going to be a little different, right? To see associations not being able to prohibit owners from putting up signs that pertain to the exact issues pertaining to the association, like we think Johnny Appleseed should be removed, or keep Johnny Appleseed, or whatever. I mean, it's just going to be kind of interesting to see how this all plays out. And again, these bills are just, this is just what we expect is going to be introduced this year. The Peaceful Assembly Bill was already introduced on Friday. Short-term rentals. This is a hot topic. No question in my mind that the legislature is going to do something on short-term rentals. Likely, they're going to repeal the law that they passed several years ago, which prevented cities and towns and municipalities from placing restrictions on short-term rentals. So I definitely think if there's one thing that there is going to pass this year, I think there's going to be some direction for associations, condominiums and homeowners associations on short-term rentals. And by that, I mean, can the association, or can cities and municipalities, or will they go back to, placing restrictions on short-term rentals based on zoning or based on ordinances? So we'll just have to see where that goes. Some other things that we're going to see likely this year is a bill on giving attorneys fees on garnishments when we're collecting judgments against unpaid assessments, and then making associations, allow for write-in candidates at any, annual meeting of the members if people want to be written in as candidates, making it a requirement that we have to allow that. And then last but not least, open meetings. Every year we seem to get some fine tuning on the open meeting law. So I think we can anticipate that that's something that can come up again this year. Before we move on to our next topic, Jamie asked me to mention this. Please let us know via chat what city you're from and also your HOA's name. That really helps us keep track of who's here today, and also so that I can tailor my presentation. If we have a lot of people from Peoria, which I anticipate, or other cities, I want to make sure that I'm tailoring my presentation to that. So just as a reminder, per Jamie, with the City of Peoria, please let us know in the chat what city you're from and your HOA's name, because the City of Peoria is interested in this information. So just go down to the chat box and the question box, and you can put it in there if you would please, to help us out. Okay, let's move on to delinquent owners. Our firm has a wonderful cheat sheet that pertains to, what are some secrets to collecting delinquent assessments. I think we all can agree that we haven't seen that large of a change. Since March, we thought that, the sky was going to start falling, that people were going to stop paying assessments. But with a lot of the government intervention and a lot of the great programs that the City of Peoria and many other cities around the state of Arizona have been providing, we haven't personally, our firm hasn't seen that much of an uptick in owners not paying assessments. Now, that being said, we have seen a small uptick in the fourth quarter of 2020. And we do anticipate, in 2021, there will be a larger number of owners who don't pay assessments. So right now, we'd like to do a little poll of those of you who are on the call. It's important for us to know what's going on in your associations. So the question in our poll is, has your association noticed an uptick in delinquencies since July 2020? You can just answer yes or no. So either yes, the delinquencies have increased, or no, the delinquencies have not increased. This really helps provide us with good feedback for our programming, and so that we know what's going on the ground in your associations. The poll is that we have only 4% of you have seen that delinquencies have increased, and 64% have said that the delinquencies have not increased. And then 32% say you're not sure. Okay, a couple thoughts on this. I think that's consistent with what our firm is finding, is that we're not seeing a large number of owners that are not paying their assessments. And I think to a certain degree that is because of all these different assistance programs that are out there. At some point, some of these assistance programs are going to run out. And so I think it's really important that we are ready and have a good plan in place so that, the delinquencies stay in control in 2021. Just one comment for those of you who don't know, if you have delinquencies in your association or if they've increased since July, a lot of the people on this call today are board members. That's something you should be asking at your board meetings. Make sure that that's a topic of discussion in your executive session, which is just the board, or even in your regular session, just asking, how many delinquent owners do we have of your manager, if you have one, or of your treasurer, if you don't have one? And what's the total dollar amount that is delinquent? Because I think we're going to talk a little bit about what are some strategies of things to do when your association has owners that aren't paying their assessments. And one of the most important ones is, timely action. And as you can see from the cheat sheet that Yvonne shared in the chat, we have a number of cheat sheets that our firm puts out. I think we have over 60 right now on different topics that help associations and board members and owners and managers. And one of our most popular ones is, our secrets for collecting delinquent assessments. Some tips that we have from, that cheat sheet. And these are tips from collecting assessments for over 20 years. The first one is going to be act in a timely manner. So first, you need to know what's going on with the collections. Every month or whenever your board is meeting, you should be asking questions about how many people are delinquent. What stage are we at contacting them regarding the delinquency? Because in our experience, the associations that act in a timely manner and that take action, whether they have a collection policy in place and they're following it, typically that could be you send a reminder letter after 30 days delinquency, then you may send another reminder letter, then you may lien the property, and then maybe it goes to your attorney to take the next step against the owner. The key thing is having a policy in place and following it. What you don't want to do is have an owner not paying assessments for 2 years, 3 years, and then trying to collect the money. It becomes more difficult. It's not impossible, but it becomes more difficult. And it's really a bad message to send to your owners that you can just, not pay your assessments for years on end. Because guess what? If they think that's what's, happening, they're not going to pay. And they're going to pay the other bills first, other than the association bill. Another really important thing to remember is don't forget to charge late fees. If an owner hasn't paid their assessment in a timely manner, a late fee is a deterrent. It's an extra charge that is added onto their account if they don't pay their assessment in a timely manner. And in a planned community, we can charge a late fee once the assessment is 15 days past due. In a condominium, we should look at the association's documents to determine, when you can charge that late fee. If it doesn't give us good direction, you should just follow what the Planned Communities Act says for HOAs, and that would be just 15 days after the assessment's due. And then don't forget also that when you charge a late fee, that you can only charge 10% of the assessment or $15, whichever is greater. If you have any questions on whether or not your association is charging the correct late fee, you're welcome to contact our office and we're happy to assist you with that. And if you call our First Fridays, which I'm going to talk about at the end of the presentation, you can ask that question for free. Okay, another important thing to do to make sure that you're collecting assessments in a timely manner is communicate with your owners often regarding the need to pay assessments. If they aren't paying assessments, make sure you're contacting them at least once a month in some form, whether it's a demand letter or a lien or turning it over to your attorney. But communicating with the owners and not just letting the person not pay and not have any communication from the association, that's bad. You should let them know that you're aware of it and that you're going to be taking the next legal action. The fourth tip I'm going to give you on collecting delinquent assessments is something that is really, really important. And this is called due diligence, doing our due diligence on the owner. And so typically what happens is an association sends a demand letter to the owner. They may place the lien on the property, maybe the management company does, or maybe your attorney does. But once it's turned over to the attorney to collect the debt from the delinquent owner, making sure that the attorney is doing due diligence and having a credit evaluation done at the beginning of the file when it's turned over to the attorney is really important. And here's why. Because in the economy, that we're in right now, and the uncertain economy, we want to determine everything we can about the owner before we start spending legal fees. And so typically what our firm does is when a file is turned over to our firm, we do what we call a credit evaluation on the owner. And this is before we spend any money pursuing the owner. And we determine if they're employed. We determine if they have any other judgments against them. We determine if they are, have equity in their property, or if they're upside down and they owe more than the property's worth, which is kind of unlikely right now in this economy. But, we're determining if they owe any other debt, credit cards, or any other, debt that may be impacting their ability to pay this debt. And really, we kind of go through a whole 20-point checklist of different ways to determine whether or not this person is a good credit risk to pursue. And once we do that due diligence, then we provide a snapshot back to the board of this is what this person's credit looks like. We keep it short, to the point, and this is how we recommend that we get the money. In some cases, like if the person is in bankruptcy, we may have to tell the board at that point, listen, we've got to monitor the bankruptcy and we can't pursue the owner. If they're a hair away from having their house foreclosed on by their mortgage or deed of trust, we tell the board, hey, let's wait and see what happens with that. But really, I'm big on strategy. And this is a great tip that we do that I think is really helpful to associations. We do our due diligence on the front end, and we provide a snapshot for you of our suggestions on how to pursue the owner legally based upon their credit. And then last but not least, just understand what remedies you have as a board to collect money from delinquent owners. Sometimes boards will come to me and they'll say, hey, we don't know, well, this person owes us money. We don't know what we can do to collect it. And really, the easiest legal remedies to talk about are we can lien the property. We record a lien with Maricopa County Recorder's Office. That owner cannot refinance. That owner cannot sell that property until that lien is paid. That's the first thing that we do no matter what. The second thing that we do is we decide whether it's better to pursue the owner by getting a justice court judgment against them or by foreclosing the assessment lien. And when we look at the credit of each person, it gives us a really good viewpoint as to what's the best way to get the money from them. And so some of the things that we're looking for is, if we ask to get a personal judgment against the owner, that just means we go to justice court, we get the judge to order on a piece of paper that, Johnny Appleseed owes X amount of dollars. And we can take that piece of paper and we can garnish their bank account, their wages if they're working, and also if they have a tenant in the property or in any property in Arizona, we can garnish the tenant's wages, garnish the tenant's rent payment to the owner landlord. So that's one way of pursuing an owner, going the personal judgment way. In order to do that, it's helpful to have a wage earner, somebody who has a job or has a rental in place. Another option is to foreclose the assessment lien. And remember, in Arizona, we can't foreclose on an owner unless the owner owes $1,200 in assessments only, or unless they're 1 year delinquent in the payment of assessments to associations. So we have to hit that benchmark before we could ever foreclose. And the only time I'm advising for an association to foreclose is if the owner has equity in the property. So let's give an example. Let's say that somebody owns a home and the property is valued on like Zillow or maybe even through the assessor's office in Maricopa County at $200,000. And let's say through our credit evaluation that I just talked about, we determine that the owner owes about $100,000 on a deed of trust and there's no other liens on the property. That is somebody who has equity. So the property is worth $200,000, they only owe $100,000. That's a good bet for a foreclosure. If we flip it and the owner owes, $200,000 and the property is only worth $100,000, that is not a good idea to foreclose on. So just having a strategy as you're looking at these delinquent owners is definitely something that you should be thinking about as we enter 2021. So just a reminder, don't forget to take timely action, have a collection policy in place, communicate with your owners, make sure that you're doing a credit evaluation so you know how collectible this person is. And then last but not least, know your legal remedies, which are liening the owner, personal judgment, and obtaining a foreclosure. Okay, I'm going to switch gears now and talk a little bit about virtual meetings. So I think at the beginning of 2020, if somebody had asked me what Zoom was, I would have just said, somebody walking by really fast, right? But now we all know what Zoom is. It's the online platform that we're using today for this virtual seminar. And I would say, that probably 80% of the associations we work with, we have probably over 2,000 associations right now that we represent, are using Zoom or another platform virtually to conduct their board meetings. So I have a little poll question, make sure nobody's falling asleep. So the first poll that I'm going to have on virtual meetings is, has your board conducted a virtual meeting since the pandemic started in March? So yes or no. Has your board conducted a virtual board meeting? And then I'm going to ask a follow-up question too, which is, planning ahead for 2021, is your board going to conduct a virtual annual meeting in 2021? And so if you could answer both of those questions, that's helpful to us so that we can get feedback as to, what's going on in your associations. As we get started, I'm going to have Yvonne from my office share our cheat sheet on tips for conducting virtual board meetings. As you can see, I have it right in front of me here. Like I said, all of these cheat sheets can be found on our website, which is www.mulcahylawfirm.com. So mulcahylawfirm.com. And so what are let's do our poll results. Great. So as of today, has your board conducted a virtual board meeting? 71% yes, 26% no, 3% not sure. So it looks like a majority of you have conducted board meetings, virtual board meetings. For those of you who haven't, this cheat sheet is going to be really helpful. So I want to make sure that you take a look at that. Is your board planning on conducting a virtual annual meeting in 2021? So 74% said yes, 6% said no, 19% said not sure. Okay, so great feedback. So it looks like most of you have adapted and are now doing the virtual board meetings, and you plan to do a virtual annual meeting in 2021. This cheat sheet has some great tips on how you can conduct the meetings virtually, in terms of providing notice to your membership. Remember that when you're sending out your notice to the members of a virtual board meeting, that you should be providing information as to how they can appear virtually at the meeting, whether it's a Zoom link or password, dial-in numbers. If it's a conference call, make sure that you're providing the notice to the owners in that notice. Now, kind of the sticky wicket of a virtual meeting, whether it's a board meeting or an annual meeting, is how do we handle owners who want to talk during the meeting, and it becomes really hard to manage the meeting if you have a large number of owners, on the property. So what we recommend is that you have an agenda, and for each meeting, and you are required under Arizona law to have that. And what we recommend is that you post the agenda with the notice so that people know what's going to be discussed at the virtual meeting, and that you have a time period at the beginning of the meeting where you allow homeowners to, come in and make any comments that they have pertaining to the association. And so have like a homeowner forum at the beginning of the Zoom meeting if you're using Zoom. And then remember that under Arizona law, before the board takes formal action on something, owners are allowed to contribute. And so what the board may want to do is allow owners to make comments via the chat function. Or if you only have a few owners in attendance, then it's easier just to allow the owners to comment than just ask them to unmute and make their comment before the board makes a final determination at the meeting. A couple other things, some pointers on virtual board meetings would be executive sessions. Either you have the executive session at the end of the regular board meeting, and the executive session, just as a refresher, is just the board, the manager, maybe a special guest like your attorney. All the other residents, owners will not be on that executive session portion of the meeting. Just announce that you're going into executive session, and either how my board does it is we just take a 5-minute break, and we're all on Zoom. So we just do a little restroom break or go get a water. And then we come back on and we check to see who's still on. If there's somebody that we don't recognize in the participants part of Zoom, we'll ask them to leave via chat. And if they don't leave, then we'll just remove them via chat. Remember that you still have to take meeting minutes, even if the meeting is being recorded, like today's presentation is being recorded, as you can see in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. You still do have to take meeting minutes because meeting minutes are the official record of what's transpired at the meetings. You still have to continue to take, meeting minutes. Remember, if you're taping the meetings by Zoom or recording the meetings by Zoom, that you have to opt in to save it. So right after the Zoom meeting, you'll receive a link, whoever set it up, and you have to save it on your server or on a special place, on your computer. Otherwise, it'll be automatically deleted by Zoom, I believe, within 30 days. So just recognize that Zoom doesn't keep all these meetings, forever. You have to actively save it onto your server if you want to keep a copy of it. Just some practice pointers on virtual meetings. For those of you who are up and running, you probably already realized, hey, this is not that bad. It's kind of easy to do Zoom meetings. And a lot of our boards prefer it. We seem to be getting better participation, and the meetings seem to be more civil in terms of, less confrontation, which is a good thing for everybody. And I really do anticipate that in 2021, we're going to see more virtual meetings, maybe even more virtual, learning opportunities in 2021 and beyond. So I think this is something that if you're in the small percentage of associations that are on this call that haven't yet reached out and started to do virtual board meetings or had a virtual annual meeting, you really need to take that step now, because we're not going to be meeting in person for sure before this summer. And I've had a couple of boards say to me, well, we'll just start meeting again when the pandemic's over. But we don't really know when that's going to be. And it's been almost a year now. In March, it'll be a year. And we want to make sure that we're not violating the open meeting law by, conducting business outside of a board meeting and doing things by email, because that's going to create problems for you down the road. So I encourage you to transition to virtual meetings. If anybody needs help with doing a virtual meeting, our firm runs boot camps, and we have logged on and helped boards run their first virtual board meeting. So please reach out to me, at mulcahylawfirm.com, and we're here to help you. We have helped boards that some of them had never ever done a Zoom meeting. Some of them didn't have a lot of expertise in computers and the internet, and we got everybody on. It was no problem. And I just had to stay on for one call. And then the next call, everybody was all set and they didn't need me anymore. Same thing with your annual meeting. Annual meetings are a little more challenging. And some recommendations I have on creating virtual annual meetings would be the following. You may need to get somebody who has expertise in running a Zoom annual meeting to help you, especially if you anticipate high participation. So we've done Zoom annual meetings for associations, that have over 2,000 owners, and it's worked out very well. What we found is that it's lower participation for Zoom annual meetings. So it's really important that you get all those mail-in ballots or absentee ballots back before the annual meeting, because you're going to really need those for quorum, because you can't count on people showing up in person. For the Zoom annual meeting, that would be one practice pointer. Another practice pointer I would say would be have all of your committees and your president's report, your treasurer's report, your manager's report, if you have one, put those all in the annual meeting packet so that people can read them before the annual meeting. And really your annual meeting could be as short as 15 minutes. Basically, you're just opening the meeting, you're establishing a quorum, you're announcing the results of the election of the directors. Maybe the reports are summarized in 1 or 2 minute summary, and then reminding people to go back and look at the packet that was sent out before the annual meeting for a deep dive in terms of what's going on with the financials, et cetera. But we're here. If you're an association that needs to have an annual meeting and you need help, we're here to help you, and we can give you lots of great tips. And please be sure to check out our cheat sheet. Okay, switching gears, let's talk a little bit about, keeping your common areas safe and what to do if someone tests positive for COVID-19 in your association. The past 2 weeks, we've received a lot of calls, as many as we received in April, truly, about associations having owners testing positive for COVID-19. Here's a typical example that we'll hear. I had an association earlier this week that contacted me and said, or maybe it was late last week, that said, we had a pickleball event at our association, and 2 days after the event, one of the people who attended the event tested positive for COVID. What do we do? So whenever you hear about an owner testing positive or a resident testing positive for COVID, the board should definitely confirm it with that person, because we don't want to be spreading rumors that are untrue. So sometimes owners, actually every time our firm has called an owner to determine if it is in fact true, they've told me the truth and said, yes, I do have it, or no, I don't, and I can provide you with proof or whatever. If you find out that somebody has tested positive and they have had exposure to others, you need to notify immediately everybody who may have had exposure with them. You do not have to use that person's name. In fact, it would be a violation of their privacy if you did, unless they agreed to it. So notify the people that may have had direct exposure. You also should be sending out some sort of a communication to your owners. Most of our boards are doing this by email, just letting them know that this happened. We are aware of several positive COVID-19 cases. These people are quarantining. We are taking all measures needed, cleaning to CDC guidelines. We're requesting again that people are wearing face masks while in the common areas. Associations should be thinking about having hand sanitizer in highly visited areas, limited capacity in the common areas. Don't forget that you have to have required signage at the pool. And we actually have a really good handout on this that I think would be helpful. And if Yvonne can share this in the chat, that would be great. Associations and COVID-19, a plan for reopening HOA and condo areas. And we go through just all the different steps about what can come up with, when an owner tests positive, what type of signage you have to have at the pool, what type of signage you should have at your other common area things such as pickleball, tennis. And remember, please, no more than 50 people should be meeting at any time as per the governor's orders at the pool. I believe it's no more than 10 people. Congregating at one time. So just be mindful that this is a really dangerous time in our country, and we shouldn't be having in-person meetings. We shouldn't be allowing large gathering on your common areas. This is the time to be really careful. And so hopefully these cheat sheets will provide you with some good information. If you have any questions on that, you're always welcome to reach out to our firm too. Again, the firm website is mulcahylawfirm.com. Okay, quick point, and then we're going to be going right on to our questions. So how do we deal with budgeting during the pandemic? You just have to keep your finger on your year-to-date budget. And so my best recommendation is every month in 2021, look at each line item on your year-to-date budget, determine if you're over or under budget. What I do for my association, especially when I was the treasurer, is I had two highlighter colors. I had a pink and a yellow. If we were over budget, I highlighted it in pink. And I started to look for reasoning or rationale as to why we were over budget. If it's under budget, I put it in yellow. And really the things that you need to be looking at are the over budget items. Is this going to be a trend for 2021? Is this just a 1 month thing? Where can we make up the money on it? I just know for my association, we had a pretty serious cleanup expense that we had for COVID owners that were in our community. And we had to do a really serious cleanup of our common areas that cost us almost $10,000. And we didn't budget for that. And so we had to skimp somewhere else in 2020. We didn't do a project that we were planning on doing. So keep an eye on the numbers, because what you don't want to do is end up in December, November, October with a shortfall, not enough money to pay your bills. So just a short tip on that would be keep an eye on the expenses and make sure that you're not over budget. If you are, plan a pivot, plan how you can correct that deficiency. Okay, our last topic is like my favorite topic to talk about. We don't have a ton of time on this, but how do we deal with difficult people? And this is going to be there's so many examples of this in associations. Actually, partially, this is what keeps our firm in business, which is sad. But, basically, sometimes people don't get along in associations. And so what are some strategies that we can implement as a board to help us through some of these difficulties? So, let's start out with the board fighting with each other. If you've got dysfunction on your board, you really need to call in somebody to help you sort that dysfunction out, whether it's your management company, whether it's your attorney. I call it an air the grievances meeting and then find common ground meeting. And so that would be one suggestion. If you're having trouble with board member fighting, bring in somebody from the outside. Our firm has come in and done a number of trainings for dysfunctional boards. We don't call it that, but wink, wink, that's what we're doing. And the results on it have been outstanding. Some boards that have had trouble for many, many, many years, we come in, we do a presentation, we talk about different personalities. We actually do personality testing of the board. We explain differences, we air grievances, and we come up with a plan to move forward. And so that would be one recommendation for if you have board member disagreements. What about if you have homeowners who are just difficult with the board? They come to the board meetings, they're, mean, rude, critical, make, allegations that aren't true. We do see this. Probably every association has at least one where the person really is disgruntled and unhappy. And so some suggestions on dealing with that person would be ask them to explain the issue that they're upset about, and then acknowledge that you're listening. If the board made a mistake on something, acknowledge that. Tell them you're sorry about that situation if it's something, that they're really upset about. Ask them what they suggest to solve the problem. See, if they can come up with something that they'd be happy with. But the most important thing is listen. Get advice from your legal counsel, from your management company as to, what you have to do. But just listening helps people, understand that they're being heard. And sometimes that can de-escalate the problem. What you don't want to do is get into a heated argument with a disgruntled owner, because there are some owners that this just fuels them. They love it. And so, keep your composure, be calm, listen to what they say. And we have an awesome cheat sheet on this called Dealing with Difficult People and Harassment. And Yvonne's going to be posting it in the chat here today. And it's also on our website under our cheat sheets tab. And that gives you a deep dive on how to deal with difficult people. But just kind of some closing thoughts on that. Everybody has it. If you don't have a difficult person in your association, it's not normal, okay? So you just have to understand that when you're on the board, this is just part of the job. And how you can effectively diffuse a difficult owner really can make your time on the board a lot more enjoyable. So I suggest that you listen to these recommendations in this cheat sheet, because we have been doing this a long time and we fine-tune this every year in terms of making it better. So last but not least, what if you have two owners that are fighting? We have this situation all the time, but the one that comes to my mind right now is we have a situation in an association. We have two neighbors who are fighting cats and dogs against each other. And one of the owners is a protected class under the Fair Housing Act. And, that really raises some new issues for the board, because normally when two owners are fighting, we don't get involved. We usually say, call the police if it's not something that's directly related to the association. But if you do have a situation where two owners are fighting, one of the owners is a protected class under the Fair Housing Act, we may have an obligation to intervene as the board and the association. So if you have a situation like that, make sure that you're reaching out to your attorney or your management company to talk about what your options are. And last but not least, I just want to remind everybody that associations that are successful in 2021, they're going to have one thing in common. And that one thing in common is they're great communicators. Associations that communicate the most and the best are always the ones that have the fewest problems. So just remember that as you're trying to navigate 2021, the pandemic. Stay in contact with your association members as much as possible. Publish your meeting minutes, even though you aren't required to. Still get them out to the community so that they know what's going on. Make sure if you're having virtual meetings that you are inviting people, that you are providing them with 48 hours notice under the law, that you're giving them the links so that it's easy for them to, dial in, put them on your website. So all they have to do is click the night of the meeting or the day of the meeting. Just staying in touch with them is really the best plan to have a hassle-free time on the board and to have a successful community. Okay, so I've got some questions in the chat, so I'm going to start out with them right away. The first question is homeowners access to board-approved contracts. Our board and community say no. Our board and community managers say no. What can we do? So my feeling on contracts is that the association is required to provide contracts for the association to owners if they want to see them. That being said, they can redact or blacken out how much the vendor is being paid. I do not know why they would do that. Under the law, they can. It just doesn't make sense to me. So I don't like hide the ball. So whenever a board or a manager is playing hide the ball on a contract, that's not a good sign to me. So what can you do? I think you should get back in touch with the manager and the board and let them know that you talked with me via the seminar and that it was my opinion that the contract should be disclosed to any owner that requested in writing. They have to give it to you within 10 business days. If they don't give it to you in that time, you may want to go to the Department of Real Estate website and file a complaint. They have a special division that hears complaints between owners and associations, and this would fall right under that category. There's a filing fee of $500, which you will get back if you win. So I hope you don't get to that point. Recognize if they give you the contract and the amount that is paid on it is blackened out. They are allowed to do that. If you want to know how much is getting paid, for the contract, just go to the budget. It'll be right there. So, it doesn't make sense to me to redact how much the contractor is being paid by the contract. But okay, next question. We're having budget shortfalls because the governing documents limit budget increases to the CPI index. Okay, this board needs to get strategic quickly. So if you don't have enough money to pay your bills because your documents are limiting, the increase you can make in the assessment amount each year to the CPI, which is going to be really low, like between 1% and 3%. You need to get your attorney involved for your association, and you need to come up with a plan to get a membership vote to either amend that section in your CC&Rs that only allows for a CPI increase, or you need to have a vote and get it above the CPI, going forward. Probably the easier thing to do would be just to change it in the CC&Rs, do an amendment to the CC&Rs, which will take a vote of the membership. If you can't do that, then like clockwork, you better do that CPI increase every year going forward. The next question is, our association has a no smoking rule in the common areas. Does that automatically include marijuana? Yes, I do believe that it would. It doesn't cover, like other forms of marijuana, like if it's edibles, but no smoking would cover cigarettes and marijuana. If you want to clarify that, you could always amend the rule. The next question, is there any chance the legislature will modify the law that requires HOAs to send statements to homeowners who are current on their dues? Great question, Joan. I should have covered that in my earlier presentation. So last year in 2020, there was one bill introduced that would not make it mandatory for associations to send that HOA statement every month to owners that are not delinquent. And so the way that the proposed bill read in 2020 was only delinquent owners would receive the statement every month, and all other owners would only receive it once a year. So I think that we can anticipate that that's going to come up again in 2021. So really good question, Joan. Another question from an association in Peoria. What happens if an existing volunteer HOA board ceases to have enough volunteers to perform functions for an HOA? Wow, great question. It's always a challenge for associations to find board members. That's just the way it works, right? Not a lot of people, everyone wants to complain, but nobody wants to step in and actually do the work. So here's what I would suggest. If your board is worrying about not having enough volunteers, number one, you should start communicating with your owners and telling them that, hey, we need volunteers on the board. please submit your name. If you don't get any response from that, the board should sit down and pinpoint people who they think might be good candidates to be on the board. And that would be like committee members, people who've come to board meetings, who've been reasonable, just people who take good care of their property. And what I typically will say is, reach out to ththose people by phone and ask them if they'll volunteer. The second time I got on my board, I said, no, I'm too busy. I don't think I can do it. And then they called me back a second time. And then I said, okay, I'll do it. And so sometimes you have to woo them a little bit, ask them and ask them again. If you can't get anybody after taking those steps, sending out a communication to your entire membership, reaching out to people who you think would be good candidates, then you need to up the ante and have what our firm does is we send a letter to the board explaining what happens if we can't get board members. And basically what that letter says is that the association, if we can't have a full board to run the affairs of the association will have to go into a receivership. And the receivership is going to cost the association a lot more money in terms of you'll have to pay the receiver. You will, property values potentially could decline because it's in a receivership. And so usually when we send that letter, I cannot think of one time actually where I sent that letter that we didn't get volunteers to be on the board. So just keep those in mind as some things in your back pocket if you're having trouble finding people to be on your board. The next question is, can a board member run a Zoom meeting, such as a committee meeting, without the manager being on it? So answer to that is yes. Of course, we're all partners. We're all a team here. So, the management company, your manager, your board, your attorney, your insurance agent, your reserve person who handles your reserve study, we all should be on the same team, right? And so if you're going to have a committee meeting and you don't want the manager on it, just tell the manager, we're not going to have you on this meeting, and here's why. Good communication can go a long way, and the manager, I'm sure, will be very okay with that. But it just depends on how your association wants to run things. Maybe the manager needs to be in on it to take the minutes or whatever. So just talk it through. What you don't want to do is, be sneaking around having meetings without everybody on the team aware of it. And there may be some meetings where the manager you don't want the manager there. Maybe you're talking about firing the manager, or maybe you're talking about the lack of performance by the manager. Still have good communication. Tell the manager, we're going to be doing a performance review of you, so we're not going to have you in on this call, but we need your help noticing it, or we want you to be aware of it so that you don't feel that we're doing anything behind your back. That's just how good businesses run. So that would be my suggestion. The next question is regarding fair housing. What are examples of protected classes and fair housing? Where do you publish meeting minutes? So I have a whole cheat sheet on protected classes under the Fair Housing Act. And so it's our federal laws cheat sheet. And it's on our website at mulcahylawfirm.com. And you can just click on the cheat sheet page on the homepage of the webpage. And then you can type in federal laws in the search engine on that page. I think my office might actually share it on this comment portion right now if they're able to quickly. But some examples of protected classes would be families with children. We have other examples of national origin, being discriminated against because of national origin, being discriminated against because you're handicapped, being discriminated against because you're, there's just a whole list of different things. And you can also just Google Fair Housing Act protected classes, and they'll give you the full listing of it too. But the most common ones we see are going to be usually national origin, race, families with children, I would say would be the most common ones that we see. Where do you publish meeting minutes? I'd like to see meeting minutes for regular meeting minutes on an association's webpage so that anyone can access them 24/7. Executive session meeting minutes, of course, would not be posted in a place where everybody could see them. Only the board would be able to see them in a passport protected area. Also, some boards send out the meeting minutes, via an email after the meeting to let people know what's going on. Kind of a big controversy on the meeting minutes is, should we put out meeting minutes that haven't yet been approved? It really just depends. Approved meaning, at the next board meeting, you usually approve the prior board meeting's minutes. If you want to get the word out to your community, what's going on, you could just send out the meeting minutes right after your board meeting and say that they're in draft form and they won't be approved until next month's meeting. The next question are, what are the biggest red flags to look for before hiring a management company? And what issues typically crop up after a management company is hired? Joan, I have a really good video that we did on this. Since the pandemic started, we have really expanded our video library on our webpage. So I hope that you will take a look at that. Again, mulcahylawfirm.com. I have a video that just talks about management company issues. I also have a cheat sheet on how to select a management company. But to give you some quick answers on this, what are the biggest red flags to look for before hiring a management company? I would check their references. I would ask them for a list of references of other associations that are, situated similarly to yours, whether it's the same, geographic area, same number of lots or units. I would talk to trusted advisors who are on your team. Ask your attorney, and hopefully your attorney isn't hooked in with the management company. Just so everybody on this call knows, we represent the association. We never represent the management company. So you want to ask somebody who's independent. So what do you think about this management company off the record, and see, what their feedback is. Look at online reviews. Frankly, online reviews kind of are the window to what's going on inside some of these associations and management companies. So trusted advisors, check their references, look at the online reviews. What are some things that you should look at? If there's a lot of people saying negative things about them, that's a warning sign that, hey, that may not be a good fit for you. And honestly, when an association asks me, hey, what do you think of this management company? I say, well, I ask them some questions like, well, what are you looking for? Where are you located? I mean, you don't want to hire a management company that is, 100 miles away from where your association is, because the manager won't visit the property. And if you tell me that, hey, we need somebody who has a high level of expertise in financial affairs because we have, a $10 million budget, you don't want to go with a mom and pop management company because they may not have that same financial expertise. Or maybe you're a smaller management company or you're a smaller association and you've been with a big management company and you're a small fish in a big sea. And maybe then you need to switch and go with a reputable smaller management company who's going to give you more TLC and treat you as the best customer or, their best customer. So these are, it's just important for you to open the dialogue with a trusted advisor and come up with a good plan for what's going to be a good fit, because you don't want to move management companies and then make a mistake, because that's painful. If you're going to change, you want to make sure you're upgrading to a better situation for you. What issues typically crop up after a management company is hired? I would say the biggest issue facing management companies is that they have a lot of turnover. And, when there's a lot of turnover, your manager changes frequently, and that's not good for associations. And why is that? Because every time you get a new manager, you really have to get that new person up to speed. It takes them like 3 to 4 months just to get up to speed on your issues. And so if you're having like a lot of turnover on managers, that's a bad sign. That's a sign that maybe things aren't going well at that management company. Another thing that typical problems is some association treasurers have difficulty with the financials that the management company is doing. Sometimes we hear feedback that the manager isn't doing their job, like the board asks the manager to do 10 things and the management manager never gets them done or gets 3 out of the 10 done before the next meeting. So these are kind of the typical problems that we see, and we have really good suggestions on how to pivot if you have any of those problems. But listen to my video, because we dissected this. It was about an hour video on management companies. It's a really good video. So that might really be helpful for you as you navigate through that process, because we talk about when to know when it's time to move on, how to hire a new management company, what to look for, etc. Okay, our association in Peoria has what we call a community guide. A blue book that our current president says is not enforceable, but it has been in the past. What can a homeowner do in this regard? Well, that's actually not a good situation. So if you have a community guide, the board should be updating that. And so if the board is saying it's not enforceable, maybe it's an old one, really I would encourage your board to create a new one so that everybody either create a new one or just say, listen, the documents are the only thing that we're going to be using. Sometimes community guides are like a little summary of what the documents say, and maybe it wasn't updated or whatever. But just communicate on it. If it's not going to be something that you continue doing, just communicate to your owners where they can look if they have questions on things. What are the obligations of the association on annual meetings when the CC&Rs expressly state that the association provide for in-person voting? That's a really good question. Okay, so how we've handled it with the annual meetings is we, just like any other annual meeting, we send out the notice. The notice will include the link to the Zoom platform for the meeting or however else you're going to be allowing people to participate. The annual meeting notice will also have a mail-in or absentee ballot. We strongly encourage owners to return the mail-in ballot prior to the meeting. I've seen associations handle this differently for in-person voting at the meeting. Some associations have a drop box at, if you have a clubhouse or a common area the day of the meeting, and that would be considered the in-person voting. Other associations allow people to appear, obviously everybody's going to come to Zoom, but they allow them to turn it in during the Zoom meeting by taking a photo of the ballot and then emailing it to, somebody on your team, whether it's the association's attorney or the manager, so it can be counted. There are a number of different ways to do it. Probably having a box the day of the meeting for them to vote in person, as long as it's a secure box, is a good way to do it. You can also do it, when they show up at the meeting, if they haven't voted, take a picture and then email it to somebody so it can be counted. If you get a lot of those, that could be overwhelming at the meeting. So you have to think about, how many people will be coming to the meeting live that haven't voted. And really, this is the time that you encourage people to vote by mail or absentee ballot before the meeting to help the board so that they can, get everything organized and have a productive annual meeting. And just, on one of the associations that we have that has like over 2,500 lots, we had an annual meeting for them in December. And, we were really concerned there was going to be a lot of people that would show up. I think the maximum we had was like maybe 10 or 15. And we only had a couple people that hadn't returned their ballot that showed up. So that just gives you some feedback. Most people voted by absentee or mail-in ballot. But remember, for annual meeting this year, if you're doing it virtually, which you really should be, you have to get those mail-in or absentee ballots back. So, and to get a quorum, that is your number one priority for this annual meeting because, it's going to be more difficult to do that this year in the pandemic. You mentioned that HOA boards at this point can't limit short-term rentals due to Arizona law, or did I not hear that correctly? You did not hear that correctly. So basically what the current law in Arizona is regarding short-term rentals is if your association wants to limit short-term rentals in any way, you have to have it in your CC&Rs for your association. And this is a really tricky and complicated area right now because there's not a lot of case law on, associations limiting rentals, short-term rentals. It's especially tricky if you're a condominium. So I really encourage you to reach out to legal counsel if you're thinking about implementing a rental restriction, like a minimum time period rental, like you can rent in the association, but it has to be a minimum of 30 days or 60 days. Or if you're going to do an all-out prohibition of rentals, make sure you're involving your legal counsel because it's tricky. You have to amend your CC&Rs to do it. And in a condo, you may not be able to do it because there's a provision in the Condominium Act that requires unanimous consent for something like that. So, what I did mention, Monica, in my presentation was that there's likely going to be a bill introduced this year in our legislature that would, place would allow cities, towns, and municipalities the right to pass ordinances or laws regarding short-term rentals for within their community. Now, I don't know how that's going to work because each city, town, or municipality would have their own laws if this, particular bill passes. So they may or may not choose to have a law on short-term rentals. So stay tuned on that. That's going to be something that will definitely happen this year. What are the benefits of having a transfer fee for homes that sell? A really good question. So we have a cheat sheet called transfer fees versus disclosure fees. And we talk a little bit about what a transfer fee is and how to set it up. But really the bottom line is that transfer fees are also known as capital contribution fees sometimes. What the benefit is that when somebody buys a unit or a lot in an association, it's a funding mechanism for the association's reserve account, basically. And so, if it's called a capital contribution fee, then the money is put into the capital fund for the association for long-term improvements of the association. If it's a transfer fee, both of those would need to be written into your documents in order for it to be enforceable. It may be smaller. It might just be for the cost of the paperwork to transfer from owner A to owner B. So I encourage you to look at our transfer fee versus disclosure fee cheat sheet that we have. It'll provide you with some good information on it. But the benefit is it's the funding mechanism for the association. Oh, okay, this is a good question from Ellen. Would another poll be helpful to ask how many are new HOA board members and how many new builds are transferred to homeowners HOAs? Okay, so Ellen, we'll keep that in mind for our future seminars that we're doing. At the end of this presentation, we're going to talk a little bit about 6 classes that we have coming up in partnership with the City of Peoria. And we'll be sure to consider doing that in our future programming. Let's see, we are looking at the difference between operating expenses versus reserve expenses. Do you have any guidance on the difference between the two? I do. So you should look at our reserve fund cheat sheet that we have on our website at mulcahylawfirm.com. But operating expenses are going to be like you're running the day-to-day affairs of the association expenses. So like what you pay your lawyer, what you pay your CPA, your accountant, your electric bill for your association, your water bill for your association, any management contract fees, any employee fees if you have employees. So these are just like the regular business expenses for running your business. Okay, the reserve expenses, that's a little bit different. The reserve expenses are for long-term capital improvements to the association. So it's kind of like a special savings account for like your clubhouse renovation and repair or roads in your association. These are things that, you don't get a monthly bill on typically, but that need to be maintained over a long period of time. And so you kind of set up a savings account so that the money goes in there so that when the useful life of the pool or the clubhouse or the roads or the roofs, if you maintain the roofs, so when the useful life of those expires, you have the money to, replace them or repair them to put them back into good condition. So there is a difference between them. Operating is going to be like your general expenses, monthly expenses of operating your business. The reserve is going to be money that's spent on long-term capital improvements to your association. But check out our cheat sheet on reserve studies because we have a deep dive on reserves and what they are and what a reserve study is and how to fund it, et cetera. That could be really helpful to you. Okay, what is the best process if our association is looking at updating the governing documents? Costs. Okay, great question, Clark. Right now, our firm has something in place which is a lot of associations really love, and it's what we call a free 15-minute review. So if your association sends us, your board of directors sends us a copy of your CC&R's bylaws, we will do a free 15-minute review of what we suggest to be changed in your documents. And most associations should be amending your documents once a decade, so once every 10 years. The cost to that, we give you an estimated cost to do the amendments as part of the free 15-minute review. So that's really helpful. In my experience, the cost is usually somewhere between like $800 and $5,000, just depending on how many changes you're making and how long your documents are, frankly. So I hope that's helpful. We also have a cheat sheet on amending CC&R's 5-step plan that's listed on our website. As you can see, I mentioned a lot of our cheat sheets. We have so many great free resources on our webpage. I really hope that you will check those out because we write them to help you do a better job at running your association. And so basically any topic that pertains to associations, we try to put a cheat sheet together to help you. What do you do when you have a board that refuses to comply with open meeting laws and come to the meeting with everything already pre-decided? They give input of the outside board members, but it's clear they really don't want that, and they vote for the decision that has been pre-made. That's upsetting to hear that. It's hard to prove that a board is violating an open meeting law, on a situation like this, because they are having a meeting to discuss something and vote on it, but there's not a lot of discussion and they're just coming in and doing the vote. So I guess as a homeowner, a few things. During the homeowner forum, express your concern that you think this is happening. B, consider running for the board yourself. Get inside and try to implement change. If you think things aren't going the way that you think they should. And C, you may need to hire an attorney to help you, by writing a letter to the board if they continue to do this. Let's see. Because I'm a new board member on a new now homeowner HOA, would adding a comment section on the poll be helpful? Because I mostly answer no, because we are a brand new HOA and have only just begun. Okay, great question, Ellen. You as a new HOA should check out our cheat sheet called Transition from Developer to Homeowner Control, because I kind of warn you about what some of the issues are for new homeowners associations. And in the future, what we'll do is if you don't know the answer, you want to comment on it, you should just put it in the comment section, and then we'll be sure to address it when we're analyzing the poll results. So great tip there. Next question. Do we need to have a homeowner's vote to approve money to be spent from our painting reserve to be spent on painting? So it really depends on what your documents say as to whether or not you have to have a homeowner vote on something. In my experience, if you're doing a special assessment, you're going to need to have a homeowner vote typically. If you're spending over a certain dollar amount, and that would be outlined in your documents, you may have to have a homeowner vote. But just voting to paint and you have the money in your reserve already, that likely can be done just with a vote of the board. But again, you got to look at your documents. If the board is restricted on how much money they can spend, even if they already have the money in your documents, meaning like there's something that says like anything over $10,000 that the board spends in a year, that they have to get homeowner approval, then of course you would have to do that. So it's hard for me to answer that without seeing your documents. So you can have an executive board meeting without notifying all of the homeowners. Okay, really good question. No, that's not right. So anytime you have an executive board meeting, you have to notice it just like you would notice a regular meeting. And you have to indicate which section in the state law that you are going to be discussing during the executive session. So the most common topics that you discuss during executive session, in my experience, are advice from your attorney, delinquencies, violations, and problems with contractors. So when you're doing your notice for your executive session, you need to state which section in the law that you are calling the executive session meeting for, and it should be in the notice. And if you need guidance on where that law is, go to our cheat sheet on board meetings. We have a whole section on executive sessions in there. Okay, what about late letters mailed out and charged by the management company to prepaid owners? Okay, that sounds like a mistake. So if an owner is prepaid and the management company by mistake is sending out a late letter, just call the management company and they should correct that quickly and apologize. Smoking rules, do they apply to outside common areas, picnic areas, gazebos, parking lots, catwalks? Again, like I said on this probably might be related to the Prop 207. Remember that, you have the right to pass rules regarding your common areas. And so what you want to do is look at your rulemaking authority. Typically, it's going to be in your bylaws. It should be broad enough to cover this. And then pass rules. If you don't want smoking in these areas, the board should pass them at a regular board meeting and then publicize it to the membership so that they're aware that there's no smoking. You may also want to put signs up so that people are reminded that there's no smoking in these areas. Does Arizona have mandatory election rules? So the answer to that is no. You may want to check your bylaws for your association, because typically how elections are conducted is listed in your bylaws. A lot of time there's not a lot of guidance in terms of, they'll give you guidance in terms of how much notice you have to give. State law says that it's, not less than 10, not more than 50 days in advance of an annual meeting. You have to use mail-in ballots or absentee ballots, because proxy voting is no longer allowed unless you're under developer control. And then look at your bylaws to see if they have any other special requirements like secret ballot or, any other special things that may pertain to your annual meeting. How much is a dog allowed to bark before it's a nuisance? Okay, that makes me kind of laugh because we have a little dog. I think what you need to think about is whoever is complaining, they should be documenting how often the dog is barking and then providing that documentation to the board. And really, if the dog barking is causing another owner to not be able to have the peaceful enjoyment of their property, the board does have to look into that and take some action, whether it's contacting the dog owner, finding out if other neighbors are also hearing the dog. We have a whole cheat sheet on barking dogs, so I encourage you to look at that too. But if an owner is complaining, the board should do some due diligence on it. They should talk to the owner that has a dog that's barking and try to resolve it that way. Also check our cheat sheet, because we give a lot of really good suggestions on how to deal with, the barking dog situation. Okay, let's see. Should the HOA have specific election rules to avoid confusion? You can, if that's something your board wants to do. Most associations don't do that, because it's really pretty simple. It's basically, if you want to write out what the procedure is, you certainly can, but this is not something that is, it's not like the national election that we just went through. I mean, this is usually something that's very manageable, and if your management company's running it or your attorney's running it, they should be able to handle doing that. Let's see. Some of the units have a wood pole roof on the patios. Would this wood pole roof be considered a limited common property? If it is a limited common property, does the statute 33-1255 pertain to it as an owner maintenance replacement item? This one's really hard for me to answer without seeing your documents, because the definition for limited common property is going to be in your documents as to what's covered or not covered. So I can't answer that one, but Rosemary, you can call our first Fridays. The next one will be the first Friday in February, and I can answer it then. Maybe you can send me your documents in advance and we'll answer it for free. Okay, if an association has a no smoking rule in common areas, does that include marijuana? So I would say yes, but you may want to amend your rules right now to make it clear that it's cigarette smoking and also marijuana. And you may also want to talk a little bit about e-cigarettes and vaping and some other things that have been changing over with technology. But I think the last few questions here are, let's see, I sued my association for short-term rentals. I believe allegedly there is one unit that has been leasing as a short-term rental for some time. Some other units are advertising on Facebook as short-term rentals. How to ensure the board stops all alleged short-term rentals? I mean, I would just bring it to the attention of the board that you think that these are short-term rentals, and then they have a duty to investigate it and talk about it with their attorney. A couple things I want to mention. During the program today, we talked about boot camps for virtual board meetings, virtual annual meetings. If your association, wants any help with that, please reach out to us. We have some boot camps where we teach everybody how to do that. Our First Fridays is something that has been wildly popular. We had it last Friday, and we all spent pretty much the whole day answering First Friday calls. What it is that any board member or manager can call our office the first Friday of each month. The next one will be the first Friday in February. And you can ask one question free of charge. You have to call between 9 and 10 a.m. I also mentioned our free 15-minute CC&R review. If you want to take advantage of that, you just need to email us your CC&Rs. It needs to come from a board member so that we know that the board is given authority to do this. And we'll do the free 15-minute review and let you know what needs to be changed. And we will also provide you with a quote in terms of how much it will cost to make the changes. And then last but not least, we have 6 classes coming up between now and June 30th. And how the classes are going to be working is they're virtual classes. We're creating a virtual HOA Academy with City of Peoria, with Avondale, Chandler, Glendale, Goodyear, Mesa, Scottsdale, Surprise, and Tempe. So all these cities are coming together, their neighborhood services departments, to provide free online virtual education to HOAs and condominium board members, owners, and managers. So if you check out our website, we have an upcoming seminars tab on the website, and all those classes will be listed. They're once a month, starting in January 2021 through June 2021. And they'll be programming the second half of the year too. So I encourage you to attend any of the classes that are listed because the City of Peoria is sponsoring them in conjunction with these other cities. And we have just some really good topics that are going to be cutting edge topics for you this year as you try to navigate, the pandemic and as you try to navigate running your associations. And every class will have the free Q&A at the end of the class like we had today. So it gives you a good opportunity to ask questions at no charge that can help your associations. So just in conclusion, I'd like to say thank you for being here today. We had a lot of questions, so we kind of went a little bit over on the time, but I think it was great. We answered all of them. Again, thank you to the City of Peoria for doing this special class just for their residents and residents that may be from other neighborhoods. And I just appreciate being here. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'm not sure if Jamie wants to make any closing remarks.
I just wanted to thank you, Beth, and your team for putting on this seminar for us. So we really appreciate it. And all the information you give is always so up to date and very much appreciated among our board members and management companies. So thank you for the time. We really appreciate it.
Awesome. Nice to see everybody, and have a great year. Hope to see you at future education classes. Take care, everybody.